Lara St.John and Matt Herskowitz. Welcome into the DiamondLane, guys, and welcome back to Winnipeg.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. What a fun tune that is. We were just talking about it off the air. I know it has a pretty cool backstory, Lara. Would you mind telling us a little bit about Kolo?
Yeah, I just learned it in Belgrade, off a guy in a kafana.
Just like that,
Kafana is like, sort of a restaurant in Belgrade, usually in this one sort of pedestrian street where you go, there's always a band and there's always lots of food, lots of wine, and it's always great fun.
You can hear the fun on that tune. I know it's a little bit of a simpler one for you, Matt.
Yeah, it's nothing for me.
But I don't know if this is the right word, but in Ukrainian, kolo means circle, and it has this sort of a elliptical drive.
From a circle dance,
It keeps you going, and it keeps you coming back. This whole album is just so cool. It's a joy to listen to, and I find myself smiling and motivated when listening to it. This reimagination of folk tunes from the Jewish diaspora, Eastern Europe, the Balkans, the Caucasus, and the Middle East for the concert stage. Lara, what is it about Roma music that inspires you?
Well, as a kid, there's so much classical music inspired by Roma music, obviously, and somehow even as a little child, I kind of gravitated towards that more than other things. That and Baroque, strangely enough, because they don't really have that much in common. But I think it's just sort of the freedom and the sort of, I think the word passion is overused, but just the freedom to be able to be passionate, which you can in even in classical music inspired by Gypsy or Roma music. And when I was like 8 years old, I was like, I'm going to play Siegfried. And of course, you shouldn't do that at 8. But, by the time I did at 11, I was so into it, so excited about it. And I think I was 11 or 12 the first time I went to Hungary and couldn't believe it. I was just like, I think somehow I got weirdly adopted by a Canadian family and this is where I belong. It was really totally weird because I am just sort of a sort of more or less Midwestern Canadian girl, and somehow I've always gravitated towards that area my whole life. So, in a little bit of a Bartokian fashion, if you will, I kind of ended up sort of making that into a hobby, or maybe obsession is more like it, and collecting tunes. So I have sort of tens of thousands of tunes from that whole area.
Yeah, really doing the ethno thing. It's
a little bit, yeah.
It's pretty remarkable. And are you still discovering new music? Like when you go back, where are you finding this stuff? You're going off into the villages and really just diving into what you hear in the bar? Or?
Sometimes, yeah. Like for example, that was just a one that I heard in a bar from a really great fiddle player. It sort of depends on which area. Like for example, Belgrade, this one street, that tends to be sort of violin centric, and of course in Romania it's all about the violin.
Yeah.
But in Russia, for example, in the lower Balkans, it tends to be more about the voice.
Right.
So then you can just sort of get people to sing stuff for you. They're always happy to do that.
They definitely are.
You're like, what's your favorite song? And then so you just kind of put on my voice notes at this point. It used to be like a little Walkman, but now it's the iPhone and just record and just listen. And generally, if you know kind of the title of the tune and the tune of the tune, if you will, then you can sort of find different versions of it and then really start to kind of understand it, know the chord structure and everything. So it's just it's my big hobby my whole life, I guess.
Oh, what a hobby. And travel obviously is something that you're passionate about, and this album is titled Shiksa. Can you tell us a little bit about that title?
Well, Shiksa was once upon a time a somewhat derogatory word to mean non-Jewish woman, which is definitely not untrue. But I decided, it's been about 70 years since Portnoy, and it's time to give Shiksa a good name. And actually, it was just a working title for the album because all of the places where we took music from, they have a word for somebody like me. So, for example, in Romani, it's Gaji, and I've been called a Gaji all over the place in all parts of Eastern Europe because, I'm sort of giant, pasty Canadian girl, and I don't find it derogatory at all. It just means non-gypsy woman. Sort of the same way in Peru, in Latin America, and Mexico, I'm a total gringa, and I don't find that a problem, Yeah,
you're a foreigner. You're not from there, right?
Exactly. And so I decided it's time for the word Shiksa to actually mean something a little better than it has perhaps in the past.
And coming from you, it's a different context than if it were coming from like
You.
a Jewish woman.
Yeah,
Or me.
a
not
shiksa
so
can
much.
a shiksa can call a shiksa a shiksa. So
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
So that's what I mean
Right.
by owning it.
Matt, I want to get you involved in the conversation here,
Okay.
further than that point. In all of Lara's travels, when did you guys first meet? When did you guys first start to collaborate?
Well, we went to school together when we were like pre-teens. So, but we
Well,
didn't
we didn't know each
we didn't
other.
really know each other. But I certainly knew of you, and I recognized you, and I knew your brother. And then somehow in 2009, I guess, I asked you to do a project, and for some reason I can't remember now why I thought of you or why I asked you, but I was like, oh, I got to get Lara. This is so.
And it just so happened that I was kind of like trying to find reasons not to be sitting at home staring at the wall because I had actually just quit smoking after chain smoking for 21 years. So when he asked me this, I was like, I just have to say yes. I'm just going to say yes. I was like, yes!
Okay, so what I asked her to do was something that I had originally hired a Jewish violinist to do it, and he was incapable really of doing the piece properly. I mean, he did it, but it was not like, to be fair, most people are incapable of doing this piece. This is why I said, okay, I have to get Lara. And the piece was called Jerusalem Trilogy, and she did it. I mean, it's like...
And rocked it.
Yeah, she totally rocked it. I mean, this piece is crazy. It's the different meters going on at the same time, and, you don't know where the downbeats for you is different for the jazz trio, and then there's it's a piece for piano, bass, drums, cello, and violin.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a crazy thing that most classical violinists are not going to be able to do, and I knew Lara would be able to do it.
So then after that, we sort of started doing, well, I figured, okay, this is a great idea for all my tunes, my whole idea from the Shiksa album and stuff. And we started collaborating on that. And we do normal stuff too.
Yeah.
Like Beethoven.
Well, yeah,
That came later.
that's exactly what I was gonna touch on. Is that you found the right guy to collaborate with if you're looking for something to do. I mean, Matt, you're the all-around Renaissance man of the piano, as I was
thank
just
you.
saying, a gentleman and a scholar. So on your Virtuosi program
That order.
tomorrow is one of the great violin sonatas, as you just mentioned, noted for its difficulty. Beethoven's Violin Sonata Number 9, the Kreutzer, named for a guy who actually didn't like it, which I always find a little bit curious.
Yep.
He hated it, actually.
Yeah, I was
and
trying
he
to put
never
it
played
mildly.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He just avoided the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just based on each of you and your backgrounds, am I safe to assume that this might not be a purist's interpretation of the Kreutzer?
Well, actually, you might even call it more purist than a purist, because at the time, Beethoven and the guy he actually wrote it for, British Tower, they would have done variations on the variations because that's kind of what the stylistic period was about. And so we do that.
Nice.
So in a way, it is kind of puristy. I mean, we're not going into sort of Dave Brubeck or whatever, but in a very stylistic manner, the way that it would have been done in the mid 1800s.
Exactly. Like, to me, Beethoven, of course, was not just a composer, but also a great improviser. There are all
Right.
sorts of stories about it. And Matt, you also occupy this dual niche as a composer and an improviser. How does that
Yep.
influence or change your interpretation, if at all, or are you just doing you?
Yeah. Well. You mean for
the
composed
Beethoven,
music?
yeah.
For classical music.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it can give me a sense of improvisation of unraveling something, not having being an improviser and not having played this music to death, because I've been into jazz for many years,
Yeah.
and just kind of recently came back to classical like in the last 5 years. But understanding how to sort of spin and weave a melody through improvisation, I can spot when a composed melody seems to have that quality, and then I'll sort of give it that quality because
Yeah.
it's that's familiar to me. some things are more composed and set, and then they should be that way. But
Right.
the Kreutzer is actually quite quote improvised.
Yeah.
There are many. You have to sort of be feeling that as you're going. Otherwise, it can really fall flat if you.
Well, and like you once
square.
said, like he would have to, especially for the cadenza bits, he had to write something because he couldn't just write rests or whatever.
Right.
But he would have totally expected the pianist to sort of go crazy.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
And Liszt played this actually just probably shortly after Beethoven died, or maybe even still in his lifetime, because this is a pretty early work. And I mean, he would have gone bonkers. Come on, let's face it.
Yeah.
Apparently he did.
He did that.
Yeah, he sure did.
So the other work on the program that I definitely want to get to is Maurice Ravel's second violin sonata. This is right at another point of change, right? With Beethoven making his way into the middle period, and then this music in the early 20th century, jazz starting to make its way into classical music. How does it factor into the program? What can you tell us about this particular piece?
Well, I mean, the sort of jazzy movement is
The blues
second,
movement?
obviously.
Yeah, the blues
blues
movement.
movement.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was kind of quite influenced actually by some, groups,
Yeah.
American groups that had started to come to Paris and this kind of thing, and he was really interested in the tonalities and the difference. The first movement though is actually like this kind of when I learned this sonata quite late actually, and I was always. I don't know, something was like there's not enough notes in this first movement or something, and somehow I didn't quite understand it very well until playing it for a couple of years, and now it's my favorite of the three by far. I mean, it's such a mini masterpiece of understated impressionism. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there a freedom in that lack of notes?
There is kind of, but
I think so.
But Ravel, there wasn't any reason for him to write more, and he had that je ne sais quoi, and he totally used it in this movement, and I think it's I mean, the other two movements are great, the blues and the last one is the moto perpetuo, and it's all fast and it goes crazy and it's great, but that first movement to me.
And talking about unraveling the melody, these big long lines that Ravel is famous for.
Like for 7 minutes at a time or something, and it
exactly.
never quite, resolves until it does.
You get to shape them in a way that when you're improvising a melody, you shape it instinctively when you're doing that.
Right.
Well, I hate to wrap things up so quickly already, but I want to hear one more selection off of this disc, which we began the interview with. And I was wondering if you guys would mind introducing this one, the Hungarian Rhapsody. Laura, I don't know if you want to explain the work?
Well, the portmanteau in the title is actually a combination of, probably the most famous Hungarian work for violin, combined with the most famous one for piano, which is Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. So we took Csárdás and Hungarian and made Csárdasian. It has nothing to do with ladies in California. And actually, it's a very witty combination of the two done by our friend Martin Kennedy.
Nice. Well, enjoy. Lara and Matt, thanks so much for coming by Classic 107 and for joining me here in the Diamond Lane.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lara St.John and Matt Herskowitz open the Virtuosi concert season with the Volcanic Violin tomorrow, September 22nd, 7:30 p.m. at the University of Winnipeg's Eckhart Gramate Hall. Go. This is going to be explosive and impressive.